My husband's car called 911 after a crash, but the ER nurse said his wife was already there. The phone vibrating against my nightstand sounded like a buzzsaw tearing through the quiet Sunday morning. I swiped the screen, expecting a sweet, "I'm heading home" text from my husband's weekend fishing trip, but instead, an emergency room nurse's frantic voice pierced my ear, asking me to confirm the identity of the woman bleeding out in his passenger seat. As a senior UI/UX designer, my entire professional existence revolves around logic, user flows, and identifying broken systems. I map out pathways. I find the exact point where a seamless experience derails into chaos, and I fix it. I thought my marriage to Julian operated on the exact same flawless architecture. He was a high-level project manager, a man who spoke in Gantt charts, risk assessments, and color-coded schedules. We were the couple our friends hated because we were just so perfectly aligned. There were no messy arguments, no unexplained absences, no gray areas. Everything was documented, communicated, and flawlessly executed. Or so I believed. Julian had spent the last 5 days on what he called a digital detox fishing trip. He claimed the corporate grind was burning out his synapses, and he needed complete isolation in a remote valley 3 hours north of our city. He had spent weeks buying specialized gear, meticulously organizing his tackle boxes in the garage, and showing me drone footage of the cabin. On Friday night, precisely at 9 p.m., my screen lit up with his final check-in. "Signal is dying, babe. Going dark for the weekend. See you Sunday afternoon. Love you." I responded with a red heart emoji, plugged my phone into the charger, and slept soundly through the weekend, completely oblivious to the rotting foundation beneath my feet. Sunday morning, 8:15 a.m. The piercing shriek of my ringtone jolted me awake. The caller ID flashed a localized number I didn't recognize, followed by "Trauma Center, admitting." A cold, heavy stone dropped directly into my stomach. I answered on the second ring, the sleep instantly banished from my system. "Is this Scarlett?" a woman's voice asked. The background noise was a chaotic symphony of alarms, squeaking rubber wheels, and shouted medical jargon. "Yes, this is her." "Who is this?" "Miss Scarlett, I'm calling from St. Jude's Level 2 Trauma Center. I need you to stay calm. Your husband's vehicle, a late-model SUV, was involved in a high-impact collision on Route 9. The vehicle's integrated e-call system automatically alerted emergency services and deployed highway patrol to the GPS coordinates. You are listed as the primary emergency contact." I sat up so fast my vision dotted with black spots. The oxygen evaporated from my bedroom. "Is he alive?" I managed to choke out, my fingers digging into the cotton sheets. "He is stable," the nurse replied quickly, her tone practiced but undeniably frantic. "He has a compound fracture in his right arm, a few cracked ribs, and severe lacerations, but he is conscious. He's asking for you, but Miss Scarlett, we're having a bit of a clerical issue." I pressed the phone harder against my ear. "Clerical issue? What does that mean? Do you need his insurance group number? I can pull it up right now." "No, it's not that," she hesitated. The pause stretched for 2 agonizing seconds. "We are currently prepping his wife for an emergency CT scan in the next bay. She has a severe concussion and internal bruising from the seatbelt, but your contact profile in the vehicle's onboard computer lists you as his spouse." My blood turned to ice. The temperature in the room plummeted. I stared at the blank television across my bedroom, my brain trying to process a glitch in the system that fundamentally could not exist. "I am his wife," I said, my voice a flat, dead line. "I'm in my house, 3 hours away. Who is in that room?" The nurse covered the receiver, muffled voices echoing on her end, before she came back on the line. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "The patient in the passenger seat was pulled from the wreckage unconscious. She was admitted under the name Maya Julian. She had his secondary insurance card tucked into her jacket pocket." Maya. The name hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The phone slipped slightly from my sweaty grip. Maya wasn't some random hitchhiker. She wasn't a desperate coworker or a stranger from a bar. Maya was my sister-in-law. 6 months ago, she stood in a blindingly white dress at an altar and pledged her eternal loyalty to my younger brother, Leo. My mind violently rewound through the last 12 months. The family bonding, weekends, the shared hobbies. Julian teaching Maya how to cast a fly fishing rod at my father's lake house. The lingering glances across the Thanksgiving table that I had foolishly categorized as brotherly affection. The fishing trip wasn't a solo retreat. It was a perfectly orchestrated, year-long affair hiding in plain sight. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The burning heat of betrayal rushed up my neck, turning my vision blurry with rage, but it rapidly cooled into a surgical, terrifying clarity. I threw off the blankets, marched into my closet, and pulled on a pair of jeans and a dark sweater. I didn't pack a bag. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and our shared home iPad. I walked out to my car, slammed the door shut, and dialed Leo's number. He picked up on the 4th ring, his voice thick with morning sleep. Hey, Scar, everything okay? It's early. Leo, I need you to get dressed right now, I commanded, keeping my tone perfectly calibrated to mimic sheer panic without spilling the truth. There's been a family emergency. Julian was in a bad car accident. I'm driving past your apartment in 10 minutes. Be on the curb. Oh my God, Leo gasped. Is he okay? Should I wake Maya? I gripped the leather steering wheel so hard my knuckles popped. Maya's already out, I lied smoothly. Just get downstairs. I need you with me. 10 minutes later, Leo slid into my passenger seat, his hair a messy blonde halo, his eyes wide with genuine terror. Leo is a third-grade teacher. He is soft-spoken, deeply empathetic, and possesses a heart so pure it makes me want to wrap him in bubble wrap. He spent the entire 3-hour drive staring out the window, his hands clasped together, quietly praying for Julian's safety. He prayed for his best friend. He talked about how Julian was the older brother he never had. With every mile marker we passed, the acid in my throat burned hotter. I kept my foot pressed heavily on the accelerator, listening to my sweet, loyal brother beg the universe to spare the man who was currently bleeding on a hospital gurney next to Leo's own wife. That's when the real bombshell dropped. While Leo stared out the window at the passing highway, I had tethered the home iPad to my phone's cellular hotspot. With one hand on the steering wheel, I glanced down at the glowing screen resting on the center console. I was verifying something I had suspected the moment the nurse mentioned the e-call system. And as the digital folders populated on the screen, verifying my worst nightmare, I realized this wasn't just a physical affair. It was a deeply financed psychological betrayal. We pulled into the St. Jude's parking lot just before noon. The rain had started to fall, slicking the pavement in a greasy sheen. I shoved the transmission into park, grabbed my purse, and marched toward the emergency room entrance with Leo jogging to keep up. The sliding glass doors hissed open, hitting us with the overwhelming stench of industrial bleach, stale coffee, and copper. The waiting room was packed, but I didn't stop at the main desk. I bypassed the line, pulling up my digital health proxy documentation on my phone, and flashed it to the security guard standing in front of the double doors of the trauma wing. Scarlett Julian. I have full medical proxy for Julian Hayes. Admitted at 8:45 a.m., I snapped. The guard took one look at my face, scanned the barcode, and buzzed us through. Leo grabbed my elbow as we hurried down the chaotic, fluorescent-lit hallway. Scar, slow down. You're shaking. I wasn't shaking from fear. I was vibrating with anticipation. We rounded the corner to Trauma Bay 4. Through the glass partition, I saw him. Julian was lying on a raised bed, his right arm encased in a temporary cast, a thick bandage taped over a jagged gash on his forehead. He looked pathetic. He looked vulnerable. I pushed the heavy door open. The squeak of the hinges made Julian snap his head toward us. For exactly 1 second, a wave of profound relief washed over his pale face. His shoulders dropped. Scarlett, he breathed out, his voice a raspy whisper. Babe, you're here. God, I was so terrified. The truck came out of nowhere. I couldn't. His voice completely died in his throat. His eyes darted past my shoulder, landing on Leo, who was stepping into the room with his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The heart monitor hooked to Julian's chest immediately spiked, the rhythmic beeping accelerating into a frantic, high-pitched chirp. The color entirely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a freshly exhumed corpse. Julian, I said, my voice echoing off the sterile tile walls, cold and sharp as a scalpel. The nurse called me this morning. She told me your wife was currently being prepped for a CT scan in the room next door. I was so incredibly confused by that. So, I figured the only logical solution was to bring the other husband to help clear things up. Leo stepped out from behind me, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. He looked from me, to Julian, and back to me. Scarlett, what are you talking about? What wife? Julian's good hand scrambled against the thin hospital blanket. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. Scarlett, please, he hissed, his eyes darting toward the open door as if a nurse might overhear. Let's just talk about this, okay? Just you and me. Leo, buddy, please step out for a second. Nobody is stepping anywhere, I commanded, crossing my arms over my chest. It was a mistake, Julian pleaded, his voice cracking. I swear to God, Scarlett, I was just giving Maya a ride. She called me, she was stressed, she just needed to get out of town for a few hours. It was a one-time thing. Nothing happened. The crash it made it look bad. I swear on my life. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just stared at him, observing the pathetic, squirming liar I had shared my bed with for 5 years. I unzipped my oversized tote bag. I reached into the transparent plastic, personal effects bag the hospital had placed on the chair next to his bed. I pulled out his cracked, blood-smeared secondary iPhone. I held it up in the air, right next to the glowing iPad I had brought from home. A one-time thing, I repeated, tasting the absolute venom on my tongue. Just giving her a ride. Julian stared at the devices, his chest heaving. You see, Julian, I started, pacing slowly to the foot of his bed. When your SUV's e-call system initiated the crash protocol, it triggered a data dump to your connected cloud account to preserve telemetry. But you're a project manager, not a developer. You didn't realize that your hidden cloud drive, the one you securely tethered to your work phone, automatically syncs to the master Apple ID, the one we share on the living room iPad. Leo took a step forward, his voice trembling. Scarlett, what's on the iPad? I turned the screen around so both of them could see it. The gallery view was open, displaying hundreds, no, thousands, of photos. There were pictures of Julian and Maya at a dimly lit wine bar. Selfies of them in the front seat of his car, her lips pressed against his cheek. Photos of them tangled in hotel bedsheets. Timestamps hovering over every single thumbnail. Look at the dates, Leo, I whispered, the heartbreak finally bleeding into my voice. Leo stepped closer, his eyes scanning the glowing screen. His breathing stopped. August 12th, Leo read aloud, his voice hollow. That was 3 months before my wedding. Julian squeezed his eyes shut, turning his head away from us toward the blank wall. Stop, he begged. Please stop. Oh, I'm not stopping, I snapped, swiping my finger across the glass screen to pull up a folder titled Expense Reports. Because the absolute best part of this little digital treasure trove is the financial ledger. I looked directly at Leo, who was now trembling so violently I thought he might collapse. Do you remember the wedding gift Julian gave you guys? The all-expenses-paid honeymoon to that luxury resort in Cabo? He told everyone it was a brotherly gift, a grand gesture to welcome Maya into the family. Leo nodded slowly, a single tear cutting a path down his pale cheek. He didn't buy that for you, Leo, I said, my voice dropping to a vicious, low register. I checked the resort logs in his email. He booked a 2-bedroom villa. He used it as a prepaid, fully funded vacation to meet Maya in secret while you were taking scuba lessons on the other side of the island. He subsidized his own affair. Silence slammed into the room, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was the frantic beeping of Julian's heart monitor and the distant wail of an ambulance siren outside. Leo didn't yell. He didn't lunge at the bed. He didn't throw a punch. The total absence of his rage was somehow infinitely more terrifying. He slowly turned around, his sneakers squeaking softly against the linoleum, and walked out of Trauma Bay 4 without saying a single word to the man who had ruined his life. I followed him. We walked 20 feet down the corridor to Trauma Bay 5. The door was propped open. Maya was lying under a thin thermal blanket, and 4 drip hooked into the back of her bruised hand. She was just regaining consciousness, her eyes fluttering open, struggling against the harsh fluorescent lights. She turned her head, wincing in pain, and saw Leo standing at the foot of her bed. A weak, pathetic smile touched her lips. Leo, baby, she slurred, the heavy narcotics dragging her words. I was in an accident. Julian was. Leo walked over to her 4 stand. He didn't look at her face. He looked at her left hand, resting on the blanket, completely bare of any jewelry because the nurses had removed it for the CT scan. He reached into his own pocket, pulled out his gold wedding band, and carefully slid it over the metal hook of the 4-pole. It clinked softly against the plastic saline bag. The concussion is temporary, Maya, Leo said, his voice entirely stripped of emotion. This is permanent. He turned on his heel and walked out of the emergency room, straight out into the freezing rain. I didn't stick around to watch Maya cry. I didn't wait for the discharge papers, and I certainly didn't offer Julian a ride home. I walked out to my car, blasted the heater, and drove Leo back to my house. The moment we walked through my front door, I went to war. I didn't shed a single tear. I poured a glass of whiskey, sat down at my dual-monitor workstation, and systematically dismantled Julian's entire digital life. I used my admin access to log into our joint brokerage accounts. Within 45 minutes, I had frozen the assets, locked his access out of the shared portals, and flagged every single transaction from the fishing trip and the Cabo honeymoon as dissipation of marital assets for my lawyer to weaponize in court. I called an emergency locksmith. By 6 p.m., every deadbolt on our 4-bedroom house had been replaced. I packed 3 garbage bags full of Julian's custom-tailored suits, his expensive golf clubs, and his stupid, meticulously organized tackle boxes, and dumped them unceremoniously on the wet concrete of the front porch. The fallout was instantaneous and utterly nuclear. Julian and Maya were left to rot in their adjacent hospital beds, both entirely isolated. Our family's group chat exploded by Monday morning. I didn't have to explain anything. I simply uploaded the Cabo receipts and a select few photos from the iPad directly to the family iCloud album. Maya's parents stopped answering her calls. Julian's mother sent him a text telling him he was a disgrace and blocked his number. They were socially, financially, and permanently blacklisted from our lives before the casts on their broken bones even had time to fully dry. 2 weeks later, Julian's lawyer tried to serve me with a motion for access to the shared checking account. I countered with the digital logs proving he had embezzled our joint savings to fund his illicit hotel rooms. The judge took one look at the metadata and practically laughed his attorney out of the courtroom. As for Leo and me, the following weekend, we didn't sit around mourning the absolute garbage human beings we had married. I took the exact amount of money Julian had transferred to his secret account for his fishing trip, which the bank had forcefully reversed back into my sole control, and booked us a 3-day retreat at a high-end spa in the mountains. We drank expensive champagne, got deep tissue massages, and laughed until our ribs physically ached. Sitting in the hot tub overlooking the snow-capped peaks, Leo raised his glass to me, a genuine smile finally breaking through the trauma of the past 2 weeks. I smiled back, taking a slow sip of my drink, knowing that the perfectly designed user experience of my new, Julian-free life was operating exactly as intended. Am I the monster here for leaving them broken and isolated in a hospital, or did they get exactly what they deserved?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.